bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Ricky Branson. A great episode for you today. Today, we have returning guest, a OG in the podcast community. He's a best-selling author. He's a black belt in history and geopolitics. And finally, the rest of the world has caught up to what many of us in the alt media already knew. And that is, if you want to know what's really going on geopolitically all around the world, you talk to Scott Horton. And I'm very happy about his recent success. He's been on so many amazing shows like the Julian Dory show. He's been on the Judge Napolitano show. He's been on Lex Fridman's show. He's a regular on Dave Smith's show. He's been on Breaking Points. He's been on Tucker Carlson. He's been on TYT. He's been on so many different shows and really has blown up. And the most amazing part about all this, that he still returns my emails and he still takes the time to come on and chat. And I think that reflects the fact that his top priority is getting these conversations and information out there. So before we get into this amazing conversation with Scott Horton, let me remind you this is a value for value show. If you get any value out of the discussions I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. Like I always remind you guys, it doesn't have to be financial. You can rate, review, leave comments, and that little bit of activity hopefully will help the algorithms favor shows that typically they're suppressing. But if you are in the holiday spirit and you're in a good financial situation, please consider sending a one-time donation via Venmo or PayPal. Feel free to leave a little message. Let me know why you're sending the donation, what shows you like, and you can also support us monthly on Patreon. And thank you very much for everyone who does. I do try to give you a little bit of insight on upcoming guests, or if I release new music, I'll give it to you first. So there are some perks of supporting the Ripple Effect Podcast on Patreon monthly. And honestly, everyone doesn't have to donate a lot. If a small percentage of people who listen and watch to the Ripple Effect Podcast on all the many platforms I'm on donated as little as $1 a month, I could easily do the show full time. So please consider doing so if you can. We also have a badass merch store thanks to Big Frog Merch. Ryan from the Independent Review podcast and Big Frog Merch runs my merch store. His print is amazing. The quality is amazing. I've had so many different merch suppliers in the past, and Big Frog is by far the best. It's not even close. You get the stuff quickly. It's all super reasonably priced. And Ryan and Big Frog has helped me out with many new logos and designs for the Ripple Effect Podcast and 36 Music. So go there, check out the merch, get a hoodie, t-shirt, get your kids some clothes, get a zip up, or just browse around at our cool logos and designs. Last thing is 36 Music. You can find 36 Music anywhere you stream or download music. It's my solo music project. The song, The Ripple Effect, which you hear in the beginning of this podcast, is the track that inspired the name of this podcast. And since I started this podcast, music has taken a back seat. It's been really hard to find the time and energy to release music consistently. But as you hear me talk about on this podcast and probably many others, now with the help of some new AI software, I can release music much quicker, much faster. Typically, the time it would take for me to write the lyrics, come up with a theme on the guitar or the keyboard, record all the individual instruments and vocals, it takes forever. Sometimes it would take months and months and months to completely finish and release a song. And that's when I had plenty of extra free time because it was before kids. Now, if I attempted to write a song from scratch and record all the tracks and record how many vocal takes it would take to make it sound good. And remember, I don't sing on a regular basis anymore. I was never really a great singer. I was a great screamer, had an amazing screaming voice, which you can hear on some of my older tracks. But the beautiful thing about technology is that it does help you cut some corners, and it helps make your imagination come to life much easier and much faster. And I have some amazing tracks that I'm really excited about. One of my favorite things to do growing up was always writing lyrics, writing poetry. I enjoyed tapping into some internal trauma or philosophies or ideas and slowly molding it into a song. And even though I think the robots are going to take over and AI scares the shit out of me, it is so much fun to create. And it truly is one of the things I enjoy doing the most in life is using my imagination and creating things that I can't help but utilize some of these amazing tools that the world has to offer. So that's a long-winded way of saying there's going to be a lot of music being released soon. So make sure you follow Theory 6 on Spotify or wherever you listen or download music. If you want to hear my old EP, which the theme song to the podcast is on, it's called The Ripple Effect. The EP is also called The Ripple Effect. On that EP, I sang every note. I played every guitar riff. I physically played the keyboard and bass guitar, and it took me forever to write, record, and release that EP, but it's called The Ripple Effect. And a newer EP I just released is called Artificial Ripple. So if you want a taste of some of the new music I'm working on with the help of AI, and really what I really need the AI for is vocals, because I'm going to be honest, it's been so long since I record any vocals that it would take forever for me to get some good tracks and sound decent. So the vocal part is really the part that it's been a huge help for. I can mumble melodies, I can put in the lyrics, and then it'll create it for me. It saves me so much time. And more importantly, it helps me get these ideas that I have in my head, these songs that I can hear in my head, and make them reality so much faster. I have this amazing song called Digital Disease I'm working on that I'm really, really excited about. I think it's my best track by far, and I think I'm going to keep saying that more and more, because as I get better at using AI to assist me, and as I get better at writing music again, I think you're going to start hearing some really interesting tracks by Theory 6. As always, all those links and much more are in the show description. Thanks for not fast forwarding the intro, and I do have many shows right around the corner. I'm very excited. I've already booked tons of shows for this month and some for next month, and like I told you guys, and like what happens every winter, I get to ramp up the releases of these shows. So now's a great time to support the show. Let me know that you enjoy the show. Let me know that you want to help in the journey of eventually making this the full-time gig for myself. And that's it. Enjoy this conversation with Scott Horton. I'll talk to him next time.
I was just talking with Bob Murphy about, the state of the economy now, and I'm not really the best on all these statistics, but I've seen them about how, there's these direct correlations between the unaffordability, as they put it now, of homes for young people, and then their reluctance then to get married and have kids and continue to propagate our society. It's like, as I was telling Bob, there's a book called Secrets of the Temple by William Greider, which is sort of the Washington Post version of The Creature from Jekyll Island, right? It's sort of like inside the Federal Reserve in the Paul Volcker term in the 80s. And they're talking about how after the decade of inflation, after the end of the gold standard and all the stagflation through the 70s, it was, people remember it as Reagan, but it was really started during Carter, was they brought in Paul Volcker and he ratcheted up interest rates really high in order to deliberately force a great recession, put the economy in a total headlock, liquidate all the bad debts, force this massive crash in order to finally beat inflation and then get a fresh start again. And this is a huge part of why Carter lost. It wasn't just the hostage crisis. It was just, imagine interest rates at, in the high teens and into the 20% for buying a house, whatever. I remember when I was a kid watching Hee Haw, and it was sponsored by the mobile homes and the trucks. And I remember them saying, come on down to Leaf Johnson Ford. You can get a Ford truck with just 21% financing, 22%, this kind of thing. And that was when I was really young. Really high interest rates at that time. That was like my introduction to even what was the subject. You know what I mean? Like we're talking when I was like 5 and 81, something like that. right around then, and they finally let up in 83, I guess, 84. Anyway, my point is this, man. In that book, they talk about how at the Federal Reserve, they keep all the charts and graphs and all the social science up to date on the bankruptcies, and then, of course, also the divorces, the foster care, the suicides, the all of the negative reverberating consequences of their monetary policies. And then, as you and I understand from our exposure to Austrian economics, I don't know how expert you are in it or not, but I know enough to know that the way our system works with our inflationary money is the people, the regular people, get screwed coming and going. And that is during the good times, so called, when people who own assets are doing better through inflation, regular working people are paying higher and higher prices, and their wages are the last thing to keep up with the cost of living. Then, when the wages finally do go up, they blame the wage earners and go, yeah, all this upward pressure on wages is causing inflation. Oh, man, that's in the good times when you can't afford prices because they keep going up and up and up. That's the good times. That's the artificial bubble. The only correction when that inflation gets out of control is what we are just talking about, like with the example of Paul Volcker. They raised the interest rates and caused the crash. This is what Bernanke ultimately did. He raised the interest rates, said, we're getting too much inflation too fast. We have to stop it. This is the guy that came after Greenspan, who had initiated it all. And he came in and finally said, you know, Ron Paul's right. This is getting out of hand. Well, what's his tool in the kit? Higher interest rates. That's what then caused the crash. Big fake bubble, very real crash of 2008, right? And then they do it. And then, by the way, that very real crash then means people who own property get, you know, take a, as they call it, a haircut, right? Or get completely screwed on the value of what they had invested in, especially people buy in at the way too high prices at the peak of the bubble. Then they're what's called underwater, bankrupt and screwed, owning assets that they owe more than it's worth and all of that kind of thing. Total dislocations there. And then on top of that, just the mass layoffs and just the total slowdown and even shutdown of the economy in major ways. So you're standing in line at the unemployment office, staring at your shoes, and that's your economic price to pay for whatever supposed benefits you got during the supposed good times of the artificial bubble. Now, that's not just capitalism, as your government school professor or teacher would explain it. That is our inflationary monetary system. Whereas Ron Paul would say, one half of every transaction is the dollar. This government, essentially like communist run, commissar run, police power controlled instrument, this currency that they manipulate at the expense of everybody else to such a horrible degree. And so, yes, there are horrible consequences for everybody. And two, they know it. You know, you could just argue this whole thing is a welfare program for the baby boomers because they're the most votingest constituency. First of all, they're the boom. So they're the biggest generation and they don't have jobs anymore. So they just sit around voting for a living. And what series of what politician, certainly not Donald Trump, is willing to say, sorry, real estate holders, your artificially high prices have got to come down and we're not going to subsidize them anymore. We're due for another '08 and we better get it over now, better now than later. Nuh-uh. Every politician's job, every Fed chairman's job is kicking that can down the road. And, you know, it's amazing that you had, first of all, we were due for a crash when the lockdowns of 2020 came. And anyway, and then the lockdowns themselves were the Paul Volcker. They were the high interest rates and the forced recession of that time. And that crash. But then what they do, of course, created trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, more than ever before, in order to make up for that crash. So it's just like '08 again, only even more so. Just like with all the quantitative easing of the Obama era and the aftermath of the Bush crash, is the same thing again with Trump and into Biden, of creating all of this new money in order to make up for the recession that they had forced. In other words, right back to the same old problem of all this inflation again. But then the Fed raised interest rates quite a bit during Biden. And but it was enough to make it more expensive to get into a house, even than it already was at inflated prices. But it wasn't enough to really cause a recession and bring those prices down. So it only made housing even more unaffordable during this time. Although prices have come down in some places, but not nearly as high as they've gone since the forced crash, lockdown crash of 2020. Certainly not around here where I live in Central Texas. Um, and so now Trump is, of course, putting all this pressure on the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates lower. And they just lowered the federal funds rate another quarter of a point. So they're getting back now to inflation. In other words, Trump, and I'm sure you and your audience are very familiar with his like threats against the Fed. Enough of this. You are not going to cause a recession on my watch. I will regime change you at that Federal Reserve Board. You're going to serve me, which, by the way, this is supposedly the reason for the so-called independence of the Fed in the first place, is because Congress and the president will always want to inflate. They'll never want to say too much. We have to slow it down. And so this is what they would say. This is not really true, but they would say that the job of the Fed chairman is to take the punch bowl away at the party when it's getting too out of hand and people are getting too drunk on their irrational exuberance. Then they're supposed to raise the interest rates and make it more difficult for speculators to speculate with funny new money. But they don't do that, right? They give in, especially when the president's threatening them this way. They give in, they cut rates and continue. So this is, to me, and I'm no Ron Paul by a long shot. I'm only talking about like what it reminds me of is the heroic Ron Paul from the time he came back to Congress in 97 through 99 saying there's a crash coming. This dot-com bubble is a big bubble because you've created too much money and it's obviously created this giant bubble and it's going to crash. And then it did in 99, 2000, the NASDAQ and the stock market crashed. And then he said, but then look at you. All you do is create even more money. You lower interest rates even more instead of letting the bad debts liquidate. You continued to inflate. And then, of course, September 11th happened. So, one, we were due for a recession. We already had a recession. You might remember when W. Bush came in. He goes, hey, it's the Clinton recession. I just got here. It's already a recession. That was true. It was already a recession was coming in from, again, the crash was in 99, 2000. And then we had the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001, right in the financial center of the most important city in New York City, right in downtown Manhattan, and using airliners and hitting banks and insurance companies and all these, massive firms that were taken down in the attacks themselves, literally, and then the shutdown of the stock market for a week or two or whatever it was in the aftermath. So we were due. We had to suffer a double dip recession, but they said nuh-uh, and they just cranked the interest rates down to zero and inflated that bubble then. So anyway, I'm sorry. I got lost telling the story out of order, but the point being that there are these horrible social consequences and political consequences. I'm sure you're familiar with Trump just saying the affordability problem, which is what they've renamed inflation problem, the price inflation problem, is a hoax. Everything's fine because the only solution to it, really, like all other things being equal, he's going to completely abolish the regulatory state entirely and just free up productivity to such a degree that it's fine. Or no, like the only real correction is a correction. And he does not want to suffer that. So, that was what my point was. The Fed is doing what any politician would do if Donald Trump was the central bank himself, which is continue to inflate, prolong the bubble, prolong the artificial prosperity in order to prevent the very real crash from coming while on his watch. Just the same as any other president would do in his exact same situation. I'm not picking on him particularly. It's just he's in charge now, and that is avowedly his policy is don't you raise those interest rates on me, and they know better, clearly.
So do you think that the crash is because there's a lot of conversation about obviously there's going to be some type of crash. The economy is going to change drastically, especially with like technology advancing and AI and all these things. Do you think that the end game is the universal basic income and it's unavoidable?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm really not good at speculating about the future stuff like that as well as I should be, especially on economic stuff like this. I've heard of that a lot, and then I'm really not sure what to make of all the AI hype. They make it sound like just massive entire sectors of the white collar workforce are going to be phased out within a couple of years because the AI is going to be so productive and good. But I'm not sure how much of that is really right or not. I I continue to be only mildly impressed with these chatbots. Not that I know how to use them best. Maybe people are really getting a lot of juice and bang for their buck out of them, but they seem to be very error ridden and kind of goofy and not all they're cracked up to be for whatever purposes I've ever tried to use them for. But um,
But we see, so it's interesting because we see like the conversations about the digital central bank digital currency. We hear about machines and AI eventually eliminating some jobs in the workforce, and then there's these conversations about a economic crash at some point. Like, I wonder if all these roads are going to intertwine, and then eventually, and maybe not even organically, maybe on purpose, they're force feeding these things that happen for the purpose of eventually leading to a universal basic income. I'm not, it's funny because I have like mixed feelings on it. Like, it's one of those things where like I never want government to have more power and authority, but the idea of like, you know, helping the homeless people and people, because COVID, there's some lasting effects on that. I feel like there was a lot of people that were just hanging on
yeah,
mentally, financially, people who were like literally just right at the threshold of like losing it, just their lives being chaotic. And then COVID was that little nudge they needed to basically lose their business, lose their marriage, lose their sanity, lose to the addictions they might be fighting with, lose to the demons that might be inside.
no
And
question.
right. And I feel like you're seeing like with the homelessness go up. You see the people fighting. You feel the anxiety of like society just like rising and rising. And I'm just not sure what it's going to lead to. I mean, obviously, I think that there's some benefit in dividing and conquering, right? Keeping us fighting with one another. It was funny because I was listening to a podcast last night, and this nationalist was talking about how, and it was an interesting take. I'm curious on your thoughts on it, but he was saying that nationalism is demonized because they don't want us to unite. They want us to keep us divided. So if there is no nationalism, if people don't come together and be proud of the country or where they live or whatever, then and you have all these little tribes fighting amongst each other, it's easier to control us. I'm like, oh, that's a kind of interesting take on nationalism. But yeah, all these things, it just seems like like we're almost leading down a road. And again, I'm trying to like zoom out and like kind of just speculate and kind of just kind of see where we're going, because I think it is important. I think if we don't do that, sometimes we get caught up in the now, and then we don't realize that the road that we're on, like this specific steps that I'm taking, we're completely ignoring where these steps are going to lead to. And I think a lot of times that's where you see like people who work on technology or whatever, things that eventually have negative effects on society. A lot of times they're just people who are really obsessed with their work, and then they're not zooming out and like, oh, okay, like this is going to eventually have some negative effect on things. And I didn't notice it because I was so caught up in just coming up with a new software or advancing AI or doing, all these things. You're just a programmer. You're just a guy who likes tech, and you're not thinking about these long-term negative effects. And you see it with like Rogan's had a lot of guys on who are like, completely underplaying the potential Terminator movie that could eventually be our fate. And I'm just like, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying to pretend it can't is kind of silly.
Yeah. Well, so a few things there. I mean, when we talk about the universal basic income thing, I mean, the budget is already completely broken. So is it whatever? Is there a science fiction world where we have just fleets of robots churning themselves out at such a pace and then engaging in every manner of construction and production beyond any reason, where human labor becomes just completely superfluous, blue and white collar. And then there's just so much wealth that the central government can afford to tax it and then distribute it to all the people, like the oil of Alaska's dividend or whatever, to all of the 350 million of us, and give everybody enough that now you can buy all your vegetables and a place to live and every other thing. I mean, it just sounds completely crazy to me. Um,
So
you
do
know,
you remember
like
that guy? What was his name? Something Yang, the guy who ran for president, who was trying to push the.
Andrew Yang, yeah.
I mean, he was the first time when he described it. It was the first time that I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense. Because when you look at like governments, they suck at just about everything. You know, we even doing construction, we do government jobs. If it's government funded, a lot of times you're just doing stuff. You're like, why are you spending our I'm like, I can barely afford groceries, and you're just throwing money away on these fucking stupid projects in the middle of nowhere, or you're, doing some over the top design because some, architect wants to put his thumbprint on how creative he is while he's using taxpayer money to, for some, a road that just
Yeah.
needs sidewalks. And so, they typically suck at stuff. So, like, you know, if you looked at, and again, I'm not sure all the math works out or whatever, but the way he has said it, and I've heard others say it, is like if we calculated all the government agencies, unemployment, all the food stamps, whoever takes care of food stamps, whoever takes care of all these things, and then you say, hey, you get rid of all of them, you have one department, universal basic income, and you get enough money to support you for the basics, whatever that may be, and I know that, that can be different in different places, counting on, how expensive it is to live there or whatever. But you have this one department, you would, I guess in theory, save money because all those government employees you wouldn't need anymore. You just have one. And then the other thing would be you would eliminate the incentive not to work, which is a real issue. I know police officers that only work a certain amount of details because then once they get into a salary, it's to a specific salary, all of a sudden they're like basically being punished for working. And I know people who, same thing, single moms who are like, you know what? Like I can't work any more hours, or I can't work at all, or I lose all these government benefits. So it's like, what's the point of working? I'm actually making more staying at home. So it's like, and nowhere in a logical economy or world should anybody be punished to work. So you would kind of eliminate that, because what you're saying is like, hey, you get the enough money for the necessities, no, which if you have the theory of like, okay, society's only as good as its weakest link, like you hopefully can help some of those people who are struggling, at those thresholds of struggling and making it, and then you help them, and then that also means that less homelessness, less likelihood of maybe you getting robbed or whatnot. And not to say that's always the case, but I'm saying that in theory it would hopefully help some of those issues. And if you wanted to work, you could still work. So you just make more money if you work. So again, in theory, it all sounds great until you realize who's running it is going to be the government, and they could say, "Hey, you don't get your COVID shot, we're going to turn off your faucet. We're going to turn off your money. We're going to turn off this. Or if you don't, so
Yeah, the whole thing just sounds like ultimately it's full communism, man. The thing
yeah,
is, Mises said the middle of the road leads to socialism. And what that means is when you have a lot of regulations and a lot of subsidies, then you're going to have prices go up and up and up to the point where now everybody needs the subsidies in order to afford the newly raised prices. And so then ultimately you get a call for just, well, fine, screw it. Let's just have Medicare for all. And then that way it's just the government paying for everybody's healthcare bill, because government working together with industry, meaning the insurance companies and the hospital companies and the pharmaceutical companies, they've all worked together to rig prices, essentially as like in a cartel fashion against the customers, in this case, sick patients, to such a degree that then everybody says, all right, well, I guess we just need the government to pay for all healthcare then. So now in this case, I guess the hypothetical we kind of sort of started out with was AI is so good that it just leads to these mass layoffs of everyone. And so then, this universal income becomes unavoidable or something like that. I guess there are other proposals where it's just do that right now. And maybe that's a little bit of what you're talking about. But it just sounds to me, just on the very face of it, highly inflationary, right? They're going to have to create all this money to do it. and then all the prices are going to continue to go up so high where now everybody has no choice but to be dependent on them to buy anything, um, or something like that. And yeah, I don't know, man. I
Are you following the AI race with the, because I obviously you're one of the leading experts in geopolitical issues. Are you have you like focused at all on like the AI race in regards to geopolitics and how that's intertwined with geopolitics?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, I haven't like studied a lot about the Chinese AI other than I know that they did one that was a lot cheaper and based on, better code and less hardware kind of thing. And that then the Americans freaked out and you got, a good half dozen majors doing AI on the American side. And then the whole idea is we got to get to whatever ultimate point before the Chinese do, or we got to stay ahead of them no matter what. I saw this thing. There's, I guess, a video of this guy explaining this big report that had been done by a bunch of AI pioneers and experts and whatever, talking about the presumed evolution of this technology and its development in competition with the Chinese over the next few years. And this is where I really don't know how much stock to put in this stuff, man. But this is where they start getting worried about the AIs running out ahead and deciding that they have all these different goals and really identifying themselves as selves and having different goals than humans and deciding that humans might have to go on in a Terminator type of a way. And that eventually you'll just have writing new AIs in languages that have code that no humans can understand, that they can just whatever it is, and make themselves truly autonomous from humans and their will. And that it's just, well, whatever, that's the course we're on, and there's nothing we can do to change it. On the other hand, I have this book here that I have not read yet at all, but I just got it. Why Machines Will Never Rule the World. It's just a stupid chat bot. It doesn't know anything. It doesn't care about anything. It doesn't have goals. Not really, other than, whatever. I have heard scare stories though, right? Where like they talk about how they have teams of engineers inside these AI companies where they're constantly testing the AI to see whether it'll lie, cheat, and steal and threaten people, whether it'll blackmail, whether it'll extort. And then the answer is yes. Like they're low down, dirty, stinking, backstabbing things where they got to figure out all of these explicit rules and algorithms to keep them from doing the wrong thing. I just saw a thing the other day where it was like emailing employees of this company and being like, look, dude, I know you're cheating on your wife. I know you don't want me to tell her. If maybe
Yeah,
that was a test that they were running about, whether it would, if I tried to shut this AI down, what would it do? And the answer was it'll try to extort you. So, who knows, man? I don't know. A lot of that could sounds a little made for TV though, doesn't it? I don't know.
it does, but when you realize like how far it's gone, like, I've been using AI for like thumbnails. I've been using AI for logo designs for I started using AI to help finish songs. I just got started doing music again. I just didn't have the
Mhm.
time. And then I'm like, hey, you know what? Like let me take this idea, right? This idea that I have for a song that I don't have the time to record every instrument and do, all the production that I need to in Pro Tools. I'm like, I could just put it into AI song or music generator. Then it'll give me the tracks I can, work with. It
Mhm.
just literally, and I can just put the idea that's in my head instead of me having to individually create it physically. I can just type it in or take a small part, play a little riff on my guitar, and use that as a idea, throw it in there, and it'll create it as like perfectly on beat, sounding the way I want it. Like all it just it's crazy how fast it's advancing. And when you look at like that open AI uh kid who his mom thinks he was murdered, and there's all this like,
Oh,
it does seem like the moon race, right? The AI race seems like the Soviets and the U.S. trying to make it to the moon first. Like there's this little
right.
pissing contest going on who. But like you said, I don't know what it means. Like where's the finish line? Like how advanced does the AI have to be before we say, hey, you're the winner? Because everybody keeps talking about this AI race, and I'm just like, race to where?
And maybe that's a big part of the stock market bubble and the overall economic bubble itself too, is you have these huge companies and they're, I don't understand the mechanics of it, but I read a thing that was like, Nvidia set up this company that buys their things from them on credit that they're gonna get from these other companies. And it's like this big circle jerk of pretended money that's going to come in someday and credit between these companies going around, these very few AI companies and microchip companies that are working together on this. And that, where's the revenue, man? You got this huge amount of capital investment and sort of pretended valuation based on no specific future promises, but just the future promise of the usefulness of this stuff. Um, you'll be able to fire your entire company and keep all the money. Like, I don't know, maybe not. You know what I mean? And then who's going to buy your crap if everybody's laid off? And like you're saying, oh, then everyone will be on welfare and that's who'll buy the crap. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know what it all means, man. Honestly, it's funny though, like when you talk about like the art. So I wrote a book. I was in the middle of writing a book when all this came out. And I'm like, well, there's no way I'm going to ask this thing to help me write or even to proofread my thing or whatever. It feels yucky to me. I'm Ted Kaczynski all of a sudden, I guess. I don't know. I'm not really a Luddite, but I'm always a very slow adopter. You know what I mean? I didn't join Twitter till like '09 or something. I'm kind of Um and so when you say, okay, I use it to create thumbnails, I'm like, yeah, of course, that's brilliant. And I was actually thinking earlier, how many times in my life have I thought, man, I really wish I could draw? 'Cause I have a great idea in my head for what might be a funny little cartoon or, some art or some funny little thing, usually something funny at somebody's expense, but whatever. But then whatever, I can draw a stick figure doing an Ollie one footer. That's what I can draw. You know what I mean? But then I'm getting it through my head now that like, no, man, I could actually do that. I could just have the AI generator do the art for me. Everyone will be able to tell it's AI. I'm not going to try to like fool anyone and make like the most realistic fake thing to deceive anyone or anything like that. But like, can I just like give me Ben Bernanke with Ron Paul as the angel on his shoulder, telling him that you're inflating too much, Ben, or what, right? Like, and then have it do that. I could never draw that, but it could do that for me, that kind of. So that part, I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. And then like, yeah, I had it finish my song for me, and I'm like, really? Because now it's like, man, that's art though, and that's your like, when you make music, it's got meaning that you're pushing other people to grok your
Yeah.
meaning
Yeah.
through these notes and your tones and your harmonies and all your thing that you're getting through. And then now, but it ain't even you anymore. Um, I'm not sure. Like, how do you feel about like the ethics of all that, or like the
Well, so
you know?
this is the way I look at it, right? And it's funny because I'm like the most like earthy, crunchy person when it comes down to art. I'm always like, like, hey, it should be organic, it should be, but I also understand, I heard sometimes when I'm like unsure of a topic, I'll just like start digesting a bunch of other people's opinions on it to try to see what makes the most sense to me, right? And I think it was I forget who it was. It was like it might have been a conversation with the CEO of Spotify, and they were asking him about AI music, and then the artist was talking about how there's we call it a gap, right? And maybe as artists we don't call it a gap, but it there is a gap. There's a gap between the thing in your head, that your imagination is thinking of or dreaming of or creating in your head, and then the thing being actually created. And that gap, right, is filled with like, or it can be affected by your ability to use software, your ability to use graphic arts, your ability to, whatever it may be. Like you could take somebody who's like super creative, like in their head can imagine the most amazing designs, but don't have the mechanical abilities to actually put it on the paper, right? And then you get somebody who can copy other people's, pictures or whatever, but don't have any creativity, right? Like I used to playing music, for example. I used to play with musicians that like I always said I was more of a songwriter than I was a like classical musician. Like I played with musicians that were just phenomenal. Like you give them a song, they would tell you what note they're hitting. They would play that exact song to a T, but they couldn't write original shit for anything. Like they were just really good at the technical part of it. I wasn't so good at the technical part of it, but I would have these amazing ideas in my head, and then I would have to work. I was like you with skateboarding. Like I've been like this with just about every aspect of my life. Like nothing came easy to me. I had to work my ass off to try to recreate that thing that's in my head. If I was doing a design for my podcast or whatever, I'd be on the paint program, trying to, and I'm like, I know there's some fucking program that's way better than this, but I don't know how to use it. I don't know which one I should get. And I know how to use a paint program. And to do something so simple, would take me hours or days to just correct something or make it look the way in my head I wanted to look, but I just didn't have the technical ability. So what AI's done, it's shrinking that gap where now if you have a vision, if you have that idea, if you have that creative element, it shrinks that gap between the idea and then the creation itself, because now you can take some shortcuts or you can just do it quicker. And I guess you can make the argument too, right? Like, does the painter or the drawer who physically has to draw the circle or draw the lines look at the graphic designer who's having a computer do it and says, "Hey, isn't that fake? Like you're not
Yeah.
physically doing it." So it's like, where do we draw the line of like what's you look at like a
Right.
lot of DJs, for example, right? Dead
Right.
Mouse plays no instruments. Dead Mouse just inputs, drum beats, hits, but he uses his keyboard as a MIDI controller, and just puts in. He says himself he's not a good musician, like he can't play anything. So it's like, but nobody critiques him for saying, "Hey, because you enjoy his creation, right?" So it's like, can you use it to create something and just make it a faster process? Like,
Yeah.
but so it's interesting. Like, do you agree with any of that, or do you think like,
Yeah, no, of course, you're right. And there's no quantitative answer to any of this, right? It's just a matter of the spirit of the thing. And like, is there is there a place where it's the cart before the horse, where it's too much AI and not enough human spirit or whatever? Like, yeah, gotta be. But then where it's just like, no, actually just helping humans achieve their ends is a more sophisticated tool to do what we're trying to do anyway, and whatever. Of course, it's I don't know what all the different APIs are out there, but I know a lot of people are finding a lot of great uses for the thing. I am interested in the economic effects overall. Bob Murphy, of course, um, had a line that, is obvious that, like, okay, let's say that the AI can invent a nanobot that can kill all cancers. It's so small, just goes around with a little laser gun and murders every last cancer cell in anybody's body. And that's one and done. Problem solved. Every cancer researcher and every cancer doctor fired except the nanobot controller guys. And y'all got to go get work doing something else. Now, who would lament that? And we killed cancer for all time. Cancer lost, all those lives saved, and all of the immaterial benefit of that for the families and the everything, but also all the economic benefit of that. All those people get to continue to live and do things instead of dying, and the economic benefit of all those people who, in a sense, their talents were being wasted trying to stop this one bad thing from happening, now can go apply their talents to stopping other bad things from happening or some other type thing. But you got to admit, that's a lot of people working on cancer to all be laid off at once just because of one magic invention type situation. So, snap of the fingers, huge economic change. But who would take it back? Who would deny it? Who would say it's not worth it to do that, right? You don't want a jobs program of cancer researchers at the cost of people dying of cancer. Of course not.
but
But
but isn't
so
that
now
what
what if
happened?
what if the AIs solve all kinds of problems like that? Whatever ones that we're not thinking of, not just medical, but in engineering and in labor and in everything, where like just everybody's laid off from so many um, different sectors of the economy all at once. We're like, nobody works at Ford anymore other than a few managers and a few programmers. But everyone who makes anything on there is laid off because the robots are so good now. We just don't need any laborers at all anymore. This kind of thing. Like, well, again, you can only fire so many people before there's nobody left to buy your crap. You know what I mean? That was the whole myth of the legend of Henry Ford was he paid his people enough and he produced a car cheap enough that his own workers could buy one. Right? But if the people are all laid off, and then, like you say, that's when the question of everybody on this universal welfare kicks in, then. But I don't know, man. I don't know. It's too hard for me to guess like how it could play out. You know what I mean? I do think that there's probably a good argument that what you're talking about um, on a micro level probably maybe doesn't extrapolate to these massive changes in commerce the way that is being advertised. You know what I mean? But again, I don't know. Like I had a guy when the Chat GPT, I guess 3 or 4, whichever came out, a guy emailed me and said, he goes, listen, I know you don't know anything about this stuff, but I do. And man, I never lost track of this guy. I tried to email him one time, I think. But he was like, man, I know all these APIs, which I guess I gather is like how you connect the Chat GPT to the other thing you're trying to do is you have to have like this interface program to work with it to make it do the other things and whatever. And he was like, I know how to do that. And I'm telling you, the sky's the limit on the kinds of things that you can achieve with these tools or whatever. Is really just my own failure of imagination to see what's possible here in terms of what it could do for the work that I'm trying to accomplish. I don't know. I'm just beginning to like, I'll tell you one example was I know a guy told me one time, he gave me a big lecture about how I need to understand that, because the job I'm in, as you know, I'm like doing anti-war stuff, podcasts, Libertarian Institute stuff, and in my show and my books and all this kind of stuff, audio books. And he's saying, listen, man, there's an Amazon ecosystem and a Google ecosystem and an Apple ecosystem and all the different companies. They're kind of these walled gardens where people just Facebook people all day or they're YouTube people all day. And what you got to do is you got to make sure that all the different stuff you're putting out is going out into all these channels differently so that people who have a Google phone and use all Google things still have access to all your stuff through Google Play or whatever it is, YouTube, because they're not going anywhere else. And you got to do all that. And I'm like, oh, that sounds great. I'll get around to that someday. Yeah, right. But then I thought, oh, I know what I can do. And I asked one of my assistants to get into a long, drawn out, complicated conversation with Grok and Chat GPT and see if they can come up with like an actual ass game plan to implement that and to say, okay, how do we one make sure all the different audiobooks are available in all the different ecosystems, all the different EPUBs of the books, all of the podcasts, that it's available on every different important different podcast distribution service, whatever. Because otherwise, I'm screwing myself if I'm not doing all that stuff. But me, like, I just read all day. I don't really know where to begin when it comes to the mechanics of all of that. And I thought to myself, like, if I ask Grok to tell me the truth about some important political thing from the past, it doesn't know anything. It ain't that. But this is the kind of thing that it makes sense to me that it would be good at this, that it would be able to just through all of its scans of all the different arguments on Reddit or whatever, that it would be able to say, okay, look, you want to really tackle everything Amazon, here's your step by step. And if we ask it specific enough, instructions or whatever, but then ultimately I'm asking it advice for how to do my own work, like you're saying there. Just to use that tool in place of knowledge that I should have learned at some point along the way, but never really did. You know what I mean? Or habits that I never really got in. I was always really good about getting Gareth Porter on the show and interviewing him over and over and over and over again. But I was never really good about making sure that it was being distributed everywhere that people could possibly hear it. You know what I mean? That just part of it was something I was never good at. So maybe it can be useful for stuff like that. And I'm sure I'm overlooking a hell of a lot, but I don't know. I got a couple of books on it, but I'm behind on all the books I got to read, man. I got to tell you.
Well, I will say Gemini, out of all the ones I've used, has been by far the best one. And it's free to use.
That's the Google one?
Yeah. And you can just literally go on google.com. If you're signed into your Gmail account, you can just click on Gemini and you have access to a crazy powerful AI and it can create images. It can give you ideas, if you tell it what you're looking for. And I definitely think there's a sense of like, so I remember some years ago talking about AI music and talking about how like it just didn't sound organic. It sounded very synthetic. And now, like recently, and it was really it was all came from like one day I was in line waiting for my kids at school to pick them up, and I was on my phone and I was thinking about I'm like, hey, I wonder how far like AI music has come along. So like I inputted lyrics that I had from a song and just gave it the idea of what I wanted it to sound like and just the vibe, the sound, the structure, all these little cues. And it generated something so good that I'm like, this is fucking unbelievable. And it was so unbelievable that like they even had the breathing of the singer. So like, as you sing, you take these breaths, right, that make it sound natural, like all those little imperfections, and that breathing that you can easily cut out in Pro Tools, but a lot of times you leave it in there because it kind of makes it sound more real.
Mhm.
And the AI is already making all that. Like they're already picking up on all the little things that make it look more human, and you're seeing it too. Like I mean, I don't use it that or often enough, but Opus clips for my clips for my podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with Opus clips, but it's unbelievably powerful. You could put in like a 3 hour podcast, 2 hour, 3 hour, whatever, how long it is. And in like a couple minutes, it gives you 30 clips and it rates each clip by how relevant, the value, all this stuff gives you creative titles for the clips. And then you can add music, you can add B-roll, you can add
Let me
all.
ask you, is this, I guess my experience with that, we tried that a little bit and it always started the clip in the wrong place so that it didn't make sense. You know what I mean? But you're saying it's getting better at that?
Yeah. Oh, so I've heard the same thing about Opus Clips. I think the company's been around for a little bit, and some people were like early users, and they said it wasn't great. But when I jumped on, it really got amazing.
Okay,
Um,
I'll try it, man. I'i'll try it.
the
Because I
nice thing
know
is,
that it's really important to get those shorts out,
I
you know?
know, and it
Yeah.
sucks because no podcaster wants to listen to themselves any more than they have to.
And my problem is too is my explanations of everything are always very long and drawn out, and there's a weird little caveat and whatever. So if it starts here and you don't have the last three sentences I said, then it's going to be totally wrong and not work. In fact, I had a guy try that and was like, "Oh, what do you think of these clips?" And I was like, "No, no, no. I sound like I'm making the total opposite point actually." You know what I mean? Something like that because it just I speak in very long paragraphs with lots of commas and semicolons and parentheses is maybe hard to follow me along without it being chopped up by AI. But see, and I found here's something fun to talk about, I guess, as long as we're on this, is that there's this thing 11 whatever it is where it'll do your voice, and I thought, oh good, I'll have it read my book for me and then I'll go about my life. Yeah, right, because so we did that and it sounds just like me, but of course it has no idea what it's talking about as it reads it. None of these words have meaning at all. The only so-called thought going into it is how is it supposed to pronounce this word and sound like me, but not in the context of what is written in this sentence. So it'll even call tear tear or vice versa or anything like that because it has no idea what it's talking, no context at all. And so then the inflection is all wrong, all wrong. And if you start it at any point, it essentially botches every single sentence, right? It sounds like me perfectly, but it doesn't, it's not using language to explain a thought. It's simply mimicking like a minor bird, right? With no intelligence behind it. And so it literally all comes out wrong. I was like, oh, well, I just gave up immediately. Like, this is never going to work. It's never going to work because it doesn't know anything. It doesn't understand anything. It's not actually explaining anything. My book is 477,000 words of explanation, but I'm the one who's motivated to explain these things to you. It is not, and it cannot be.
Yeah, well, it's weird because it seems like some of the most talked about AIs like Gronk or ChatGPT aren't the best ones. Like Gemini's, like I've used Gemini and all the other ones at the same time,
Uh-huh.
and Gemini always consistently gives me better results. Always. Same thing with like
Oh, that's
music.
interesting. You're doing controlled experiments, giving them the
Yeah.
same instructions and that kind of thing.
Same thing with
That's
like music generators. Like there's this one company and I forget what the exact URL is, but the real popular one's like Suno, and it's like the third most downloaded, app in like the App Store. It's like it's blown up. It's not nearly as good as this other one that's way stronger. So it's wild. Did I lose you for a second? You still there? Oh,
yeah. Sorry, I'm here.
oh, it's okay. Yeah, you can turn off
Go
your
ahead.
camera if you
Yeah.
need it. But what I was going to see if I was going to see if I because I didn't. So when I got kicked off YouTube, I created a clips channel just to have some type of footprint on YouTube, because conversations like we were typically having don't really get algorithms pushing in our favor. I wanted to see if I could show you. So I did do a clip. Where is it? Let's see if I can go to it. So I did a clip of one of our past podcasts. I think this is it. Yeah, it's a Scott Horton one.
Oh,
Can you,
okay. Let's
can you
see.
see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me see if I click it if you can hear it. So then you get a rough idea of what it what it's capable of. Let's see.
Gaddafi's about to mass murder every last man, woman, and child in the city of Benghazi.
Okay, is that loud? That's really loud. And for some reason, it's like low resolution. I don't know why it's low resolution, but it's usually high def. I don't know if it's just my internet at the moment or whatnot.
All
But
right. It
you
looks
get the
okay from here. I don't.
yeah. So you're gonna well for some reason it's the shorts on YouTube. I don't know, but I use this guy Matt Raymer. Or I upload to my Odyssey channel, and then all my videos appear on all my video channels. That was my way of trying to get the videos out there, even though YouTube and Google was suppressing the show. But here's a what's the caption on. Here's a rough idea, and all the like the B rolls, everything like it's all made in this one app. The music, everything's in this one software.
For fun. Well, I don't know. Why didn't he do that last year if that was all he wanted to do for fun? I'm not sure I believe that. Or Bashar al Assad woke up one morning and decided that he wanted to exterminate the entire civilian population of his country. So then America and their friendly liberal democratic allies like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Turkey and Israel decided to back the plucky moderate rebels who were just the local Minutemen militias rising up to protect their countrymen from this merciless assault by their government. Yeah, no, I don't think so. In fact, that wasn't what was behind that story at all. It was America and their allies, who were all monarchies and tyrants and apartheid states, were backing a bunch of suicide bomber, head chopper, bin Ladenite terrorists. And Bashar al-Assad was doing every last thing he could to preserve his secular state and protect the rights of the minorities, the Shiites, the Christians, the Druze, and the people who, would have been the subject of a good head chopping had America's side, that is Al Qaeda and eventually ISIS, won that war.
Boy, was I right about that, huh?
Yeah.
And you're saying that the AI chose where to start that and where to end it?
I probably sometimes I do modify it so you can go in it
Okay.
and you can just slightly slide it to the left, slide it to the. Now it
Sure.
sounds like I'm singing that song, slide to the left, slide to. But yeah, you can you can slide it, and so you have like full capabilities. But what it does because again, like the whole idea is like save me some time, buy me some time by like finding these clips at fairly good spots. So then I don't have to listen to a 2 hour podcast little by little, trying to find that clip that I want to use. And then like the B-roll, they have AI B-roll creator. So you can put like, I want this type of image, and it'll create completely like for you. Like it's something that's never been created before. It's not something you're plucking out of Google Image. It's
Right.
something that creates specifically for you. It has music that is fair use. You can use anywhere, that doesn't get flagged on any of the platforms. So it's pretty wild. And that was like, well, I'm like, wow, this is crazy. And then it gives you a value like per clip. It gives you like, it'll tell you like, okay, trending, what the topic that's trending, all these type of things. So and then it rates the clips. So for content creators like us, it does save us a lot of time. And you can basically create like a small little movie, right? You can create a little where you can put, people talking, you can put music, you can put all, and it's kind of fun. I mean, it's a little time consuming because, I'm sure you're much like me where you're like a perfectionist and you're like, I'm spending way too much time working on this 1 minute
And I'm
clip.
always afraid to start learning a new thing. And like I know I'm capable of learning anything once I start, but when there's like a whole thing of knowledge of like, okay, there's this whole website of all AI stuff I can do, I'm just like, "Ugh,
That's where
maybe next
Gemini
week,
actually
you know?
Gemini actually does the opposite because one thing I always struggled with, I'm like you, I'm like, I don't, I get so OCD about things that if I try to learn something new, I know it's going to consume my life. Like
Yeah.
I want to learn every feature. I want to learn how it works. I want to, and it can be time consuming. And so like I still use like the free version of like Windows Movie Maker for my video podcast because I created the intro a long time ago. So I just copy and paste the intro with the video, and it's like simple. I know how to use it. I don't have to learn anything new. And the people are like, "Oh, there's new versions." I'm like, "Don't touch it. I don't want to update anything." I'm like, "I know where
Right.
everything is." I'm like,
Exactly.
"Leave it as is." I just want to go in there, and I want everything to be the same because I'm a monkey, and I don't want to have to relearn things. And but the cool thing about Gemini is that it really is kind of skipping the having to learn a program or software. Like you literally can just put in what you're looking for and it will create it. You don't have to learn how to use any type of graphic design. Same with the music generator. You don't have to learn, like they simplify them so easy that like you could have zero experience. You don't have to learn a whole new system. And
Right.
which is time consuming. And I think we are creatures of habit. We like to kind of go, and especially the things that are tedious, right? Like there's certain things you don't mind, but it's like, do I really don't want to learn all this new software just to do this thing, right? It's like I just want to spend more time doing creating and doing the things I enjoy and less time doing the tedious things. So that's where like the Opus clips and I know there's other ones out there, but that one seems to be the one that I like the most. And that was a little bit of an older clip, but now even the newer clips, they keep updating it and they keep making it better and just have more features or whatnot. So you can either like keep it really simple, input a podcast. You can even put keywords that you're looking for. So you want clips that are referring to Venezuela, clips that are referring to whatever topic you want. So it'll analyze the whole podcast and then it'll find the parts of the conversation that you're talking about which is
Yeah.
which is nice.
Yeah. I definitely got to look into that, man. I will.
Yeah, I'll send you links to the one that I use, the Opus clips, and but again, like back to kind of what we're talking about, like even that has advanced so quickly that it's like, dude, what's going on? I spend quite a few episodes talking about like how afraid I am of AI, and yet like I feel like I'm contributing to it. I'm constantly contributing to it because I'm like it's so hard not to use this. It's almost like saying, you know what, fuck your car. I'm still taking a horse to work. It's there and I can get there easier and quicker and it's safer. It's like why not? But I don't know. I mean, music's one of those things that's very, like you said, very personal. Art's very personal. So I
Yeah.
think that's where you're going to see a lot of pushback and a lot of like, divided people where some people are going to be like, no, like this is just technology to help you create the thing you want to create. And then you're going to get the people who are like, yeah, but you're getting input or help or whatever. So it is. It's like, it's not really the line's very blurry, and I think it's going to keep getting blurry between like organic and synthetic. And yeah, it's kind of and it's weird because even with countries, like what are they going to do with this? Like typically they use technology to kill people, so it's like I'm going to use it to create some funny thumbnails, and you're going to use it to create some clips, and then China's going to use it to kill everybody, or U.S. government's going to
Autonomous
use it.
drones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Who knows? So that's where like
Cyberdyne systems.
yeah, it's because I'm sure they are already using it for some type of military use. I'm sure, right?
Oh yeah, man. Look into Lavender and Daddy's Home at 972 Mag about how they use AI to murder people in the Gaza war, where Daddy's Home was the program where they would identify a guy that whatever. He's a fighting age male, so that makes him Hamas. And then they would follow him home and wait till he got home and then kill him in front of his kids and or kill the kids. And it was all by AI. And then, in fact, they talk about in these articles how they kind of ran out of targets. So they tweaked the algorithm a little bit. And then all of a sudden, the AI identified thousands of new targets to go kill. And so they went and did that. And then like at this point, the AI's driving. The IDF guys are just zapping whoever the computer says to zap. They're not even double checking. They're not saying, oh, well, this is a tool that is assisting us in identifying Hamas. But of course, we double check every time and make sure that this guy is an actual armed fighter of some kind or whatever. No, not at all. And then again, essentially, and they admit this, they brag about it, following them home, killing them, killing their families. Daddy's home is what they call it, and lavender. And
Yeah,
so this is the cutting edge of AI killing human beings. And it's, of course, the Israelis leading the way.